What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Human Predator Pack podcast. Today is a Q&A show. I got 4 questions for you, 3 serious, 1 silly. The serious questions, we're going to talk about strength training while you're in a calorie deficit. We're going to talk about coming back from illness and starting to train again. And we're going to talk about whether or not hunters should train themselves for sleep deprivation. But first, I want you to do something for me. I want you to click the link in the profile if you haven't yet and download 5 biggest backcountry training mistakes. It is going to give you the goods on strength training for backcountry hunting, conditioning, rucking, mental preparation, all of that kind of stuff to help you avoid some of the stuff that really messes up hunters and limits their success and honestly just makes them have a worse time. So if you haven't yet, click the link in our profile, download that, and it's going to help set you up for success for this hunting season and every hunting season after that. So, okay, moving on. Let's get to the questions. So the first one, strength training in a caloric deficit. It's a pretty normal thing to do. A lot of people do it. It's people that want to make physique change are obviously going to strength train in a caloric deficit, or people that just want to lose weight. I think it is one of the most important things that you can do when you're in a caloric deficit because muscle tissue is metabolically expensive. So it costs a lot of calories to maintain muscle tissue. And so if you're not strength training when you start to go in a caloric deficit, your body's going to take that expense and spend it and get rid of it. So you're going to lose muscle mass if you're not strength training while you're in a caloric deficit. So I think it's one of the best things that you can do. Second thing on top of that, main thing to really focus on as you go into that caloric deficit is your protein intake. If you're not eating enough protein, it's going to be harder to maintain that muscle mass and it's going to be harder to recover from your training sessions. So if there's going to be one thing to focus on as you're in a caloric deficit is make sure that you're eating enough protein. An easy way to do that is to use palm portions. Precision Nutrition has taught this for years. I went through their certification, over a decade ago. And it's a simple way to figure out if you're in the ballpark of enough protein, and then you can adjust up from there. But a palm-sized portion, so 1 palm, a woman should have about 1 palm worth of protein at a meal, and a man should have 2. Okay, so that puts you like 2 palms puts you somewhere in the 30 to 40 gram range. 1 palm puts you somewhere in the 15 to 20 gram range. And then kind of going from there, eating 3 to 4 meals per day of that much, you should probably be in the ballpark. Another simple way to figure it out for dudes is to use your height in centimeters. That doesn't work as well for women because you're just not quite as tall. You don't need that much protein. So your height in centimeters is going to give you way too much, not way too much, but it's going to likely give you more protein than you need. So for women, using the palm portions or using like 0.7 grams per pound of body weight up to 1 gram per pound of body weight is going to be fine for you. You can also base that off of your ideal body weight and eat that much protein, and you're probably going to get enough. Dudes can do the exact same thing, but just for simplicity's sake, a lot of times it's easy to just base it off of your height in centimeters. So making sure that you eat enough protein is going to be good. And if you're somebody that struggles with like big highs and lows in blood sugar, even if you're not like diabetic, but you have good swings, I think the biggest thing is going to be spacing your meals out so that you don't tank and have low energy for your training sessions. Other than that, I think just don't make the deficit too big. Like stay in a moderate to light deficit, and you'll be fine. And especially if you maintain your strength training consistency, you're going to see yourself lose fat and you're going to see yourself maintain muscle mass. You don't need to go into huge deficits to get to where you want to be. And if you're eating enough protein, you're training consistently, you're staying hydrated, and you are, eating a balanced diet, just, pulling back your calories, you'll be just fine. I just think it's really important to maintain strength training volume as you are in a caloric deficit. So good question. If you have follow-up questions with that, that's the big stuff. I don't think we need to overcomplicate it with anything other than that. You could supplement with something like creatine. Creatine is going to help, maintain muscle volume, hydrate muscles, help them recover. And we know that it works. It's the safest and most researched supplement on the planet. I don't make a lot of supplement recommendations, but it's useful. It's useful in general. And if you're in a caloric deficit, it could be very helpful to you as well. Second question, let's talk about the sleep deprivation question. So whenever we go on a big hunt, right? So if we're going into the backcountry or we have an elk hunt, a mule deer hunt, a sheep hunt, whatever, you're going to end up typically sleep deprived. And so the question is, what are your thoughts on sleep deprivation training in prep for hunting season? I prioritize sleep all year. And the hunting season hits and I get significantly less sleep during 4 to 5 day hunts than I typically do. Is there any value in training for this? No, I don't think so. Because like all you're going to do is mess up the rest of the year. And I don't think that you're really going to get any benefit from it. You're used to it when you go into season, you know that you can function. And, I've talked to some different guys that we've consulted with over my time in the tactical world, and maintaining healthy sleep throughout the year and then only having periods where it's deprived is the best way to go. So you can deal with that. But if you put yourself through several cycles of sleep deprivation per year, it's going to end up messing you up. It's going to end up messing you up from a physiological standpoint, from every standpoint. It's just not a good thing to do to yourself all the time. So I don't really see a lot of value in training yourself for that, because you can adapt to it in the moment that you need to, and then you need to get back to a regular sleep schedule and recover. So the way that the guy that explained it to me is like, you got he actually called it a long hunt, which would be about a season. So you can go through about 3 months or so of sleep deprivation and then come out on the other side and be okay. But if you perpetuate that by doing several cycles of it year round, it's not really good for you. And so you're not really going to get much of a benefit from doing that. I mean, maybe some if you do a little bit leading up to it, because if it will psychologically benefit you because you feel like you're more prepared, maybe try it. But you got to think about all of the other things it's going to take away from you. It's going to take away from your performance at work, your performance with your family, your performance with your training, like everything. So you have to think like, is the benefit that I potentially, which we don't know that there's a benefit to this, potentially could get from this, is it worth the cost of taking away from all of the other things that I do and all of the other things that I enjoy and the other aspects of my life? And no one can answer that question for you, but I would wager for most people that's not worth it, because why would you give up sleep and take care of yourself over the long term for a short amount of time when you can adapt to that short amount of time when you're sleep deprived and then recover from it on the other side and just go do what you got to do because you got to hunt? I would say I don't see a lot of value in depriving yourself of sleep outside of hunting season. If you got to get up and do what you got to do during hunting season, get up and do what you got to do. I think we all have those periods, and sometimes we have them with work and other parts of life. But I don't see value in depriving yourself of sleep to prepare yourself to deprive yourself of sleep later. So just sleep, train, give yourself the fuel, the sleep, the energy that you need to be able to put a lot into your life. And then just, I mean, for lack of a better term, just suck it up when you got to suck it up in your out hunting. You know what that's like. You've done it for your life and maybe your entire life. So I don't see a point in depriving yourself of sleep when it's going to take away so much away from the other aspects of your life. It's going to mess up your training. It's going to mess up everything. It's just so sleep. And when you have to hunt, like, you're just going to get less sleep, and that's just part of the deal. So now the third question, we're going to talk about coming back from being sick. And so this is a really good question. And I think a lot of people could benefit from this. So the first, say you're out of training for an extended period of time, say 4 to 6 weeks due to an illness or injury. In my case, mono. I have no idea how I got it. Who you kissing, man? Who you been kissing? You've been kissing somebody, because that's how you got it. It's a kissing sickness. So how long should you take to ease back into it? A week? 2? Assume it highly depends on your existing base and injury, but curious of your thoughts. I would not put a time frame on it. I wouldn't think in terms of like, well, I'm going to take 2 weeks to ease back in. I would start with just light workouts and see how I respond to them. And one of the biggest things that I would focus on is making sure that I would feel energized by the end of a workout. So I would never go through a workout when coming back from being sick like that and tank my energy, because you're going to deplete yourself of resources that you probably still need to recover from being sick, or because you've been in the tank for so long. Putting yourself into the tank more is going to make it difficult for you to recover. You're not going to gain fitness from it. It's just not going to be useful. So I would just play it by ear and start to see as your capacity comes back. So start with light workouts, plan them lightly so you don't frustrate yourself. So you don't have the psychological stress of like, I wanted to do X and I wasn't able to. Feel it out. Do a light warm up, Do light conditioning sessions. I wouldn't do anything that's like super intense until you start to feel like yourself again. But I really think the biggest thing is making sure that you have energy at the end of each training session. So one of the things that you could do is actually stop the training session as soon as you start to feel good. Like obviously not just after the warm up, but after you get into some of the bulk of what you want to do. If you're like, I feel good, I'm going to call it for today, and do that until you start to see some of your normal capacities come back. You know, if you're measuring your HRV, as you see that start to come back, as your sleep starts to normalize, as your heart rate starts to normalize and stuff during your conditioning sessions, and your output starts to match what it was before. Like if, let's say that you could, I'm pulling something out of my ass here, but let's say that you could run 5 miles in 40 minutes with your heart rate in zone 2. As soon as you can get back to something like that, you know that you're probably good to go and you can start dropping the hammer again. But I don't think I would think in terms of time frame. I would think in terms of like, I'm going to feel this out. I'm going to make sure I leave resources in the tank, and I'm going to, I'm just going to progress as I can progress and not deplete myself. But I want to stress, like, you should walk out of every training session for a while coming off of something like that, feeling pretty good, especially if it's an illness. Injuries are different. Injuries, it depends on the injury. It depends on where it is, like how the severity of the injury. You know, I'm of the camp, like, let's say that you hurt your shoulder, you hurt your left shoulder. I think you should do everything that you possibly can in training that doesn't affect that left shoulder, because it's going to help you heal faster. It's going to maintain your strength in that arm. You know, if you're hurt, I think you should do everything that you can that doesn't affect the injury. But as far as illness goes, like, that's a whole nother animal. Like, that's systemic. And I think you need to be really careful about burning yourself back in when you come out. And I think expectations can do that. So writing down exactly what you're going to do for a workout, having a rough idea of like, these are the things that I might like to try, but having no expectation of it actually happening. And then making sure that you leave each session feeling energized, I think, is a very important way to approach that. The final question is just a silly little sucker. I got asked, he's actually one of a Human Predator Packmule fully guided client, Ryan. He asked me if I would rather do the burpee mile or if I would rather do a marathon on the air bike. And I'm going to tell you 100%, every day of the week, I would rather do a marathon on the air bike than I would the burpee mile. I will deal with the time of doing a marathon. I mean, I'm doing 26 miles on a bike ain't going to take you that long. You know, it's not that bad. But a burpee mile, it's going to be miserable. It's going to be miserable after the first 20, 30 yards. And then you have however many yards to go after that. I can't remember how many yards are in a mile off the top of my head. But you got 4 trips around a track doing burpees. That is going to be absolutely awful. And you'd be like, oh, Todd, well, don't you want the challenge? Yeah, I like challenges, but that just seems dumb. I don't want to have any part of that challenge because I don't care to find out how fast I can do burpees for a mile. I think burpees are dumb for the most part. They're kind of a silly exercise. So to see myself doing burpees for however long it takes me to do a mile, no, I'm out. I will gladly take on a lot of challenges, a lot of other physical challenges. But that's not one that I'm going to take on. So let's recap what we talked about here with our questions. So if you're strength training in a caloric deficit, make sure first, it's a good thing because it's going to help you maintain your muscle mass, which is important for your health and for your longevity and for your performance. Make sure you're eating enough protein. Don't make the deficit too big. And if you have blood sugar fluctuations, just make sure you eat balanced meals and you spread them out throughout the day so you're not like tanked. I think one of the biggest problems when people start going to a caloric deficit is they just think about the deficit and they cut back food or they skip meals or they do whatever they can. Spread things out, be smart, don't make the deficit too big. And, you know, one of the easiest things you can do is just go by your hunger cues to maintain a deficit and not overeat. So if you make sure that you're truly hungry, so when you start to feel hungry, give it 15 minutes. If you're actually hungry, then eat. And then at meal times, hit those protein things that we talked about. And then if you eat and you're hungry in another hour or two, you probably ate too little. If it takes you, 4 or more hours to start to feel hungry again, you probably ate too much. But if you're in that 3 to 4 hour window and you're like, okay, I start to feel hungry again, then you probably had an appropriate size meal. You can also do all the measurements. You can weigh your food. You can do the macronutrient measurements. You can do all of that. I just like to give other people options because that's some people doesn't work for some people. Some people like the math, some people don't. But eat enough protein, and don't make your caloric deficit too big. So those are the big things with strength training for and while in a caloric deficit, the sleep deprivation. I don't see a point in doing it. Sleep year round. Make sure you take care of yourself. The best thing that you can do is go into a period of high stress with a lot of resources. So depleting your resources before you get into a period of stress like that just doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. And it's going to take away from the other aspects of your life. So sleep normally throughout the year. And then when you're going to be short on sleep during a hunting trip, you're just going to be short on sleep and you'll be fine. Having the resources in the tank to deal with it is going to do far more for you than training yourself to be sleep deprived. It just doesn't make any sense. And then when it comes to coming back from an illness, the biggest thing is leave resources in the tank at the end of each workout. Don't crush yourself. Start off slow, take what's there. Don't try to force it. If you go and you do something and if it's 15 minutes, then it's 15 minutes and just let it be. Don't have an expectation. And then as you start to see your normal abilities return, then you can start to crank it back up, but just don't put expectations on it and don't put a time frame on it. Okay. And if you do that, that's going to help you a lot. So, thanks so much for the questions, guys. Just remember, if you're not following us on Instagram, you should be at Human Predator Packmule. When I'm going to do a Q&A episode, I post several prompts on there to insert to ask your questions. You can also email me, todd@humanpredatorpackmule.com, and I can answer your question on the podcast that way. Or you can just comment on one of these episodes wherever you listen to it with the questions that you might have. So thanks for listening. Again, if you have this raises any questions for you, shoot me an email, todd@humanpredatorpackmule.com, and I would be happy to answer them. And I will talk to you next time.